Thank you for having me here today. My name is Kimberly Smice, and I am here to share different policies and court cases on religion in the public school system. My purpose is to give you the most up-to-date policy information concerning religion and the public schools. My goal is to be a neutral observer, so the board can determine if any policies need to be updated for our district. And know that all of my information will be coming from the Pew Report, the U.S. Department of Education, and then also an NPR Radio Kansas which talks about Trump's stance on prayer in schools. So before we start talking about some of the policies, I want to review some history of religion and the public school system. So one of the biggest controversies that started was in the 19th century. The Protestants and Catholics fought over Bible readings and prayers in schools. They argued about which one should be used in the school system. So which one, should it be both, should it be one or the other? Then in the 20th century, there was another disagreement, and this one was between the Protestants and the conservatives. And they were talking about the Charles Darwin's theory of evolution and if it should be taught or not. Was that trying to give another input into our students that some parents didn't feel need to be taught? And know that all these disagreements about religion in schools still continue today, so it is not something that has been resolved over the different centuries. So the issues surrounding religion in public schools, some things that we need to know before we actually dive into some of the different policies that could be brought up in our school district. The first one is about constitutional guarantees. So what that means is in our First Amendment, it protects the freedom of speech. So a lot of times when things go to the court, it's because people feel that their freedom of speech is being taken away from them through the public school system. Another issue that is brought up a lot is it being a battlefield, the public school system, for students, parents, teachers, and administrators. And the reason that we bring this up is that the school system is teaching their children, and so parents don't want something taught onto their students that they don't want. So it's really just this big battlefield for religious interests, and they're just clashing. You know, parents might feel one way, teachers might feel another, administrators might feel another way. So there is just all these different areas that could come about when it comes to religion. And the last thing that we need to know is the Establishment Clause. And that is that the Congress can't establish a religion or favor one religion over another. So when we look at some of these court cases, all that the courts can look at is the facts that are in front of them, so then they can be neutral in the situation. So the first thing I want to look at is pledge and prayer. So this is a controversial topic that we need to make sure is followed through in our policy. So one thing that is challenged a lot is the words "under God" in our Pledge of Allegiance. So in 2000, Michael Newdown filed suit challenging the words "under God," saying that it fell underneath the Establishment Clause and that it was a religious exercise. And he felt that his child was being forced to say it when they didn't want to. In the end, that lawsuit did not get settled because there was a lack of custody of his daughter. So it kind of just sat there for a few years. And then in 2010, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals and popped back up, and they ruled that the reciting of the pledge did not mean that you were establishing a religion. You were just citing what our government was saying and what they had established. And then there are also the restrictions on prayer in public school settings. So the Santa Fe Independent School District versus Doe Court case in 2000, they decided that there should be no sponsored school recited prayer at high school football games. So you can't just say everyone stand for the prayer like we would say for the pledge. So they said, nope, you can't do that anymore. And then in 2019, a football coach was fired over saying a prayer with just its football players. And the Supreme Court decided again that they wouldn't overturn him being fired for it because there were some factual questions that were not answered. And so they couldn't give a say one way or the other because, again, they only look at the facts. Another topic that we need to look at is the religious expression in public schools. So there are 4 general principles used to speak or associate with religious purposes. So students can have prayer groups, religious clubs, the see you at the pole gatherings, just as any other groups may meet. Students can pray when they aren't engaged in school activities or during their class time. So if they want to read their Bible, Torahs, Qurans, pray before meals, they can do that whenever. Again, they just can't be pressured into it. And students may not harass people about their religious choices or force their religion on others. We do need to know that if there's arguments or issues, the school is responsible to take care of those issues, so to intervene if there is some disagreement. And also, schools may not deny a group based on their religion. So just as you have sporting events at your school, any religion is allowed to meet, read their Bibles or Torahs, and it doesn't matter what their religion is. That brings us to the Elementary and Secondary Act of 1965. This was put in by Lyndon Johnson, and in Section 8524, it requires that the Secretary of Education gives guidance for the state and local educational agencies and the public over how public prayer is protected in public schools. So they need to say that they're allowed to do it, basically. Every year, by October 1st, the school district needs to make sure that they are providing how they are protecting their students and their prayer. And if they don't submit that, they do not receive funding from that grant, or the act. So there are a lot of things that it covers, but you will not get funding if that part of it is missing. And the purpose is to provide information on the current law concerning the sharing of religion in public schools. So they want to make sure it's followed through every year, that the school district is aware of what they need to be doing. It also brings in religion in curriculum. So the Supreme Court's decisions to have set restrictions on teaching religion in public schools. They've had very set guidelines. So there is a court case, the Epperson court case, and there's also an Edward court case, and that said that if you taught one evolutionary theory, you have to teach another one. So it can't just be one-sided. They have to have options. But then in the Kotzmiller versus Dover area school district in 2005, that case identified the teaching of intelligent design. So that was meaning he wanted to teach that there was a higher power that created people and their thoughts. But the court decided that is not allowed because it is religious and it is not scientific. So if it does not fall underneath a scientific theory, it cannot be taught. The Bible, though, can be taught as a piece of literature as long as it is telling a history and the content of the biblical passages, but it cannot be used as a devotional during the school hours. So they can be brought in, teachers can use it, but again, you just need to make sure that you're following those strict restrictions on them. That also brings us to the topic of holidays in school. So religious holidays can be taught in school. You can compare different religions and how they might celebrate differently. But again, they cannot be observed or promoted on a student. You cannot put your feelings onto a child of what they should be doing. In holiday programs, they can be performed as long as the students have an option to not participate in them. So if they feel that it is against their religion to be doing something, they do not need to be part of that program, and it needs to be established so no child feels like they're being forced into something that they are not okay with. Our rights inside and outside the classroom. Well, for students, they can talk about prayer and assignment. If they want, they can say whatever they need to, and as a teacher, you need to make sure that you are grading the content not in their beliefs. Schools need to accommodate student religious practices, so if a child needs to leave early for some religious practice outside the school building, they should be excused from those. And students can have religious messages on their clothing. But as a staff member, you can ask them questions about what the message may say if you do not understand what it is trying to say. So you do have a way to question it within restrictions. As teachers and administrators, there is the Wig versus Sioux Falls School District that happened in 2004, and a teacher sued the school district because they wouldn't allow her to teach the Good News Club after school hours. And what the court decided was that when the school day is over, teachers are private citizens and they can follow their religious roles. So she was allowed to teach it in the school building to students that volunteered to stay back. And it is also okay for teachers and administrators to exercise their religion by wearing religious jewelry and answer questions about religion if they were asked. It also brings up the discussion of equal access and religious activities. So the Equal Access Act says that students' religious activities have the same access to school facilities just as any other activities would. That goes along with baccalaureate ceremonies. Those ones can be organized by people outside of the school system. So like a private group of ministers can put it together and they can use the school for that ceremony. Again, it cannot be forced for people to attend. It is always optional. And students can pass out religious materials to classmates just as any other materials would be passed out. And moments of silence can be held in your schools. Students do not have to pray during those times. It is all optional. So then that brings us to our current president's philosophy on prayer in schools. He believes that the government should never stand between the people and God, and that schools stop students from praying and sharing their faith. He feels that there's a big restriction on that, and that he feels that students aren't being protected. That he had students there during this meeting, that one was told to wipe the ashes from his head after Ash Wednesday by a staff member. And then another student shared how they had been bullied about wearing their hijab to cover her hair and that she didn't feel that her religion was being taken care of. So in response to these, he has some actions on religious expression, and he wants to have empowerment. So he's setting up a federal complaint process that students can use to alert authorities if they are being discriminated against with their religion. He's sending out reminders to all 50 states. Department of Education secretaries will receive the letter reminding them of the First Amendment religious rights, and he warns that school administrators could lose federal funding if they violate their students' right to religious expression. So he's taking it very seriously. So that leaves me with a quote for you, from Francis Collins, that says, "One of the greatest tragedies of our time is this impression that has been created that science and religion have to be at war." This is not true. We keep getting these kind of feelings about it, but as the court cases have stated, that if you follow being fair to everyone, then anything can be possible. You just need to make sure that you are being fair is really the key. So these are all the references of the different websites that I used in my research. If you have any further questions, please email me and let me know. Thank you again for your time and have a great day.